Welcome back to our channel, where we share the most incredible real-life stories that will restore your faith in humanity. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because trust me, you don't want to miss the amazing stories we share every week. Today's story is about a woman whose determination and heart changed not just one family's life, but challenged an entire community's perspective on what it means to truly see someone's worth. Meet Sarah Thompson, a 28-year-old woman with a master's degree in child psychology from Stanford University. Sarah had always known she wanted to work with children. From the time she was young, she had an intuitive understanding of how kids think and feel. She could calm a crying baby with a gentle song, help a struggling student grasp a difficult concept, and turn any ordinary afternoon into an adventure filled with learning and laughter. Her professors had consistently praised her innovative approaches to child development, and her thesis on emotional intelligence in early childhood had been published in a prestigious academic journal. But Sarah faced a challenge that had nothing to do with her qualifications, experience, or passion for working with children. Sarah was born with dwarfism, standing at 4 feet tall. And in the world of high-end domestic staffing, where image often seemed to matter more than substance, this physical difference had become an insurmountable barrier to finding work in her chosen field. For 18 months, Sarah had been searching for a position as a nanny or child development specialist. She had applied to over 200 positions, each time meticulously crafting her cover letter to highlight her education, her experience volunteering at children's hospitals, and her innovative methods for helping children develop confidence and emotional resilience. Her references were impeccable teachers, child psychologists, and families she had helped during her internships all spoke of her exceptional abilities and natural gift with children. Yet time after time, Sarah found herself facing the same pattern. Phone interviews would go brilliantly. Potential employers would be impressed by her knowledge, excited about her creative approaches to education and child development, and eager to move forward. But when it came time for in-person interviews, something would always change. Families would suddenly remember they needed someone who could reach high shelves, or they would express concerns about how their children might react, or they would simply stop returning her calls altogether. The rejections were devastating, but what hurt most was the way they were delivered. Sarah had grown accustomed to discrimination throughout her life, but she had hoped that in a field focused on nurturing and understanding children, people who worked with kids were supposed to see beyond surface differences, the prejudice would be less pronounced. Instead, she found herself facing assumptions about her capabilities, her authority, and even her safety around children. One particularly painful rejection came from a family in Beverly Hills. The mother had been enthusiastic during their phone conversation, praising Sarah's approach to bilingual education and her ideas for incorporating music and movement into daily learning. But when Sarah arrived for the interview, she could see the woman's expression change immediately. The interview was cut short, and later that evening, Sarah received a call from the placement agency saying the family had decided to go in a different direction. The placement agency, Morgan & Associates, specialized in connecting high-net-worth families with domestic staff. Linda Morgan, the agency's founder, had initially been impressed by Sarah's credentials and had been confident about finding her a placement. But as the rejections piled up, even Linda began to express doubts. "Sarah, I believe in your abilities completely," Linda had said during one of their meetings. "But we have to be realistic about the market. These families have very specific expectations, and unfortunately, image is often part of those expectations. Maybe we should consider expanding your search to include positions in schools or therapy centers instead of private homes." But Sarah wasn't ready to give up on her dream. She had spent years preparing for this career path, not just academically but emotionally. She had worked through her own childhood challenges, developed strategies for building confidence in the face of adversity, and discovered methods for helping children embrace differences in themselves and others. She believed that her unique perspective and experiences could be incredibly valuable to the right family. The financial pressure was mounting. Sarah's student loans required monthly payments that were stretching her budget to the breaking point. She had taken a part-time job at a local bookstore to pay for basic expenses, but it wasn't nearly enough to cover her costs. Her small apartment in a modest neighborhood was far from the life she had envisioned, but she was determined to make it work. Friends and family members began suggesting she consider other career paths. Her well-meaning sister encouraged her to look into corporate training or adult education, fields where her psychology background would be valued and where physical appearance might matter less. Her parents worried about her financial stability and urged her to at least consider the school positions that Linda had mentioned. But Sarah had a vision that went beyond just finding any job. She believed that the right family was out there, a family who would value her skills, appreciate her perspective, and benefit from everything she had to offer. She spent her evenings researching child development techniques, learning new languages, and developing educational programs that incorporated her understanding of how children learn and grow. Her apartment was filled with educational materials, toys, books in multiple languages, and art supplies. She had created learning games that helped children develop problem-solving skills, emotional intelligence activities that taught kids to identify and express their feelings, and physical activities that built confidence while accommodating different abilities and learning styles. Sarah's approach to childcare was holistic. She understood that children learn best when they feel safe, valued, and understood. Her methods focused on building genuine connections with kids, helping them develop critical thinking skills, and fostering their natural curiosity about the world around them. She had strategies for dealing with everything from separation anxiety to sibling rivalry, and her techniques had been proven effective during her internships and volunteer work. As her search continued, Sarah began to document her experiences. She started a blog about the intersection of disability and employment, sharing not just her struggles but also her insights about resilience, determination, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. The blog began to gain a small but devoted following, with readers praising her honesty, wisdom, and positive attitude in the face of ongoing challenges. What Sarah didn't know was that someone very important was about to discover her story, and that discovery would change everything. Meanwhile, across the city in a sprawling mansion overlooking the Pacific Ocean, tech mogul James Wellington was facing his own crisis. At 42, James had built one of the most successful artificial intelligence companies in the world. His innovations in machine learning had revolutionized everything from medical diagnostics to environmental monitoring, and his net worth had recently crossed the $3 billion mark. But all his success in the business world couldn't solve the personal challenge that was keeping him awake at night. James was a single father to 7-year-old Emma, a bright, curious child who had been struggling ever since her mother's death in a car accident 2 years earlier. Emma had been just 5 when the accident happened, and despite the best therapy and support money could buy, she remained withdrawn, anxious, and resistant to connecting with the parade of nannies who had come and gone from their lives. In the past 18 months, James had employed 12 different nannies. Each had come with impeccable credentials, glowing references, and impressive experience with high-profile families. There was Margaret, the British nanny with 30 years of experience who had worked for European royalty. There was Isabella, who spoke 4 languages and had advanced degrees in both education and child psychology. There was Chen, a former pediatric nurse who specialized in trauma recovery. But Emma had rejected them all. She would hide in her room when they arrived, refuse to engage in activities they planned, and create elaborate schemes to make their jobs impossible. She had locked one nanny out of the house during a rainstorm. She had convinced another that the house was haunted by creating mysterious sounds and moving objects. She had told a third nanny that her father was planning to fire her anyway, so she might as well quit immediately. James was at his wits' end. His company demanded significant travel, and he had important meetings with investors, government officials, and international partners that he couldn't cancel or conduct remotely. But every time he tried to leave Emma with a caregiver, she would have panic attacks, refuse to eat, or become so disruptive that he would receive frantic calls requiring his immediate return. The situation was affecting every aspect of his life. His business partners were growing frustrated with his frequent cancellations and divided attention. His assistant had started scheduling meetings around Emma's school hours, which severely limited his ability to conduct international business. Most importantly, James could see that Emma was suffering. The vibrant, joyful child she had been before her mother's death seemed to be disappearing entirely. James had consulted with child psychologists, family therapists, and specialists in childhood grief. They all agreed that Emma needed stability, consistency, and someone who could help her process her trauma while rebuilding her trust in forming attachments. But finding someone who could connect with her seemed impossible. Dr. Patricia Hayes, Emma's therapist, had been working with both father and daughter for over a year. During one of their family sessions, she had made an observation that stuck with James. "Emma is incredibly intelligent and perceptive," Dr. Hayes had said. "She can sense when someone is going through the motions versus when someone genuinely cares about her well-being. She's also extremely protective of her relationship with you, James. She's afraid that accepting care from someone else might somehow diminish her connection with you, or worse, that person might leave her too, just like her mother did." Dr. Hayes had recommended that they look for someone truly exceptional, someone who wouldn't just manage Emma's daily needs but could help her heal and grow. Emma needs someone who understands what it feels like to be different, to face challenges, to have to work harder than others to prove their worth. She needs someone who won't just try to fix her, but will accept her exactly as she is while helping her develop the tools to navigate her emotions. This advice had resonated with James, but translating it into a hiring decision had proven difficult. The high-end staffing agencies he worked with seemed to focus primarily on credentials and experience with elite families. While these qualifications were important, they didn't address what Dr. Hayes had identified as Emma's core need for authentic connection and understanding. James had tried being more involved in the selection process, conducting extensive interviews and even having potential nannies spend trial days with Emma. But his demanding schedule made it difficult to give the hiring process the attention it deserved, and Emma's resistance to new caregivers made trial periods traumatic for everyone involved. The most recent nanny, Caroline, had lasted only 3 weeks. She had come highly recommended from a family in Manhattan and had impressive experience managing complex schedules and educational programs. But Emma had sensed something inauthentic about Caroline's cheerful demeanor and had systematically tested her patience until Caroline finally snapped, raising her voice and making Emma cry. When James came home to find Emma hiding in her closet and Caroline packing her bags in frustration, he realized that their current approach wasn't working. He needed to think differently about what Emma really needed. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, James found himself in his study, scrolling through his laptop and thinking about Dr. Hayes' words. Almost without thinking, he opened a new browser window and began searching for articles about childhood resilience, trauma recovery, and unconventional approaches to healing. It was during this late-night research session that James stumbled across Sarah's blog. Her most recent post was titled, "Why Different Doesn't Mean Less Than, Lessons from the Job Hunt." In it, she wrote about her experiences facing discrimination, but more importantly, she shared insights about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of seeing beyond surface appearances. What caught James' attention wasn't just her eloquent writing, but the depth of understanding she demonstrated about the psychology of children who feel different or misunderstood. She wrote about strategies for building confidence in kids who had been marginalized, techniques for helping children process difficult emotions, and approaches for creating safe spaces where kids could be authentically themselves. One paragraph in particular resonated with him. Children who have experienced loss or trauma often develop an acute ability to sense authenticity in others. They can tell immediately whether someone genuinely cares about them or is simply going through professional motions. This isn't a flaw or a difficulty, it's actually a sophisticated emotional intelligence that, when properly supported, can become one of their greatest strengths. James spent the next hour reading through Sarah's earlier blog posts. She wrote about her educational background, her volunteer work with children in hospitals, and her innovative approaches to child development. But what impressed him most was her perspective on overcoming challenges and her insights into helping children navigate difficulties. In one post, she described working with a young patient at a children's hospital who had been refusing to participate in physical therapy after a traumatic accident. Sarah had developed a series of games and activities that made the therapy feel like adventures rather than medical treatments. Within weeks, the child was not only participating enthusiastically but was also helping other young patients feel more comfortable with their own treatment programs. Another post detailed her work with siblings who were struggling with rivalry and communication issues. Sarah had created a system that helped them understand each other's perspectives and develop empathy, transforming their relationship from competitive and hostile to supportive and collaborative. As James read, he began to see something that the placement agencies and their formal interview processes had missed. Here was someone who truly understood what it meant to face challenges, who had developed genuine expertise in helping others overcome difficulties, and who approached her work with the kind of authenticity and care that Dr. Hayes had said Emma desperately needed. By the time James finished reading, it was nearly 3 in the morning. But instead of feeling tired, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. The next morning, Sarah was shelving books at the small independent bookstore where she worked part-time when her phone buzzed with an email notification. She almost didn't check it immediately, assuming it was another automated rejection from one of the many positions she had applied for. But something about the sender's name caught her attention: J. Wellington. The email was unlike any she had received during her job search. Instead of a formal inquiry about her availability or a request for her resume, it was a thoughtful response to her blog post from the night before. "Dear Sarah," it began, "I came across your blog last night while researching approaches to helping children overcome trauma and build resilience. Your insights about authentic connection and the emotional intelligence of children who have faced challenges resonated deeply with me. I wonder if you might be interested in discussing a position that would allow you to apply your expertise in a very personal situation." The email went on to describe James's situation with Emma, though he didn't mention his wealth or status. He simply presented himself as a single father struggling to help his daughter heal after losing her mother. He explained Emma's resistance to caregivers and her need for someone who could understand what it felt like to be different or misunderstood. "I'm not looking for someone to simply manage my daughter's schedule or ensure she completes her homework," James wrote. "I'm looking for someone who can help her rediscover joy, rebuild her confidence, and develop the emotional tools she'll need to navigate life's challenges. Based on your writing, I believe you might be exactly the person she needs." Sarah read the email 3 times, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. After months of rejection and discrimination, here was someone who had found her not through a placement agency or job board, but through her own words about resilience and understanding. She responded immediately, agreeing to a phone conversation. When James called that afternoon, their discussion lasted over 2 hours. James asked thoughtful questions about her approaches to child development, her strategies for working with children who had experienced trauma, and her philosophy about helping kids build confidence. "Tell me about a time when you helped a child overcome a significant challenge," James asked. Sarah described her work with Marcus, an 8-year-old boy at the children's hospital who had become completely withdrawn after losing his leg in an accident. Traditional therapy approaches hadn't been effective, so Sarah had spent time simply sitting with him, not trying to cheer him up or push him toward activities, but just being present and available. "After several weeks, Marcus finally told me that he felt like he wasn't a real kid anymore," Sarah explained. "He thought that being different meant he couldn't do the things other children could do. So we started exploring what being a real kid actually meant. We made lists of all the things that made him uniquely himself: his love of dinosaurs, his ability to make people laugh, his kindness toward other patients. We talked about how everyone faces challenges, and how overcoming them actually makes us stronger and more empathetic." Sarah had then worked with Marcus to develop adaptive strategies for the activities he loved. They redesigned games so he could participate fully, found new ways for him to engage in sports and play, and most importantly, helped him see his difference not as a limitation but as part of his unique story. Within 3 months, Marcus was not only participating in all the hospital's activities, but he had become a mentor to other children facing their own challenges, Sarah continued. He developed this incredible ability to help other kids feel less alone and more hopeful about their own situations. James was impressed not just by the outcome, but by Sarah's approach. She hadn't tried to minimize Marcus's challenges or pretend they didn't matter. Instead, she had helped him reframe his understanding of what those challenges meant and develop genuine confidence based on his real strengths and capabilities. "That's exactly the kind of thinking Emma needs," James said. "She's incredibly smart, but she's convinced herself that being different or having experienced loss makes her somehow broken. She needs someone who understands that those experiences, while painful, can also be sources of strength and wisdom." They talked about Emma's specific needs, her interests, and the kind of daily routine that might help her feel secure while also encouraging growth. Sarah asked insightful questions about Emma's relationship with her father, her memories of her mother, and the ways she expressed both joy and distress. Children who have lost a parent often struggle with two conflicting needs, Sarah explained. They desperately want to feel safe and loved, but they're also terrified of becoming attached to someone new who might also leave them. The key is building trust very slowly and proving through consistent actions, not just words, that you're not going anywhere. James was struck by how well Sarah seemed to understand Emma's situation, even though they had never met. Her insights aligned perfectly with what Dr. Hayes had been telling him, but Sarah was able to articulate practical strategies for addressing Emma's needs. As their conversation continued, James realized he wanted to offer Sarah the position. But he was also aware that his previous attempts to hire nannies had failed, and he didn't want to raise Sarah's hopes only to have Emma reject her as well. "I'd like to invite you to meet Emma," James said finally. "But I want to be completely transparent with you about the challenges. Emma has rejected every caregiver we've tried to introduce, sometimes quite dramatically. I believe you're different, and I think your approach could be exactly what she needs, but I can't guarantee how she'll react initially." Sarah appreciated his honesty. "I understand completely," she said. "Building trust with a child who has been hurt takes time, and it can't be rushed. If you're willing to be patient with the process, I'm confident we can find a way to connect." They arranged to meet the following Saturday at a neutral location, a small park near Emma's school, where they could have an informal introduction without the pressure of being in the family's home. James explained that he preferred to let Emma meet potential caregivers in casual settings where she felt more comfortable and in control. After hanging up the phone, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation she hadn't experienced in months. This opportunity felt different from all the others, not just because James had approached her based on her expertise rather than through an agency, but because the conversation had focused entirely on Emma's needs and how Sarah could help meet them. That evening, Sarah spent hours researching trauma-informed approaches to child care and reviewing her notes from similar cases. She wanted to be as prepared as possible for meeting Emma, but she also knew that genuine connection couldn't be scripted or forced. Sarah chose her outfit carefully for the meeting, selecting clothes that were professional but not intimidating, colorful but not overwhelming. She packed a small bag with a few simple activities, things that could spark conversation or provide a comfortable distraction if Emma seemed nervous, but nothing that would feel like she was trying too hard to impress or entertain. As she prepared for what could be the most important interview of her career, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. All the rejections, all the closed doors, all the assumptions about what she could or couldn't do had led her to develop a deep understanding of resilience, authenticity, and the importance of seeing beyond surface appearances. Now, she had the opportunity to use those hard-won insights to help a little girl who was struggling with her own challenges. It felt like everything she had experienced, everything she had learned, and everything she had overcome had been preparing her for this moment. The next Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel full of possibility. Sarah arrived at Meridian Park 15 minutes early, using the extra time to observe the space and notice details that might help her connect with Emma. She watched other families playing together, noted the various activity areas, and positioned herself on a bench where she could see James and Emma approaching without seeming intrusive or overwhelming. When James and Emma arrived, Sarah's first impression was of a father and daughter who clearly loved each other deeply but were both carrying visible tension. James walked with the careful posture of someone trying to project confidence while internally worrying about every detail. Emma stayed close to her father's side, but her eyes were constantly scanning the environment with the hypervigilance that Sarah recognized in children who had learned to expect disappointment or abandonment. Emma was a beautiful child with her mother's delicate features and her father's intelligent eyes. But Sarah could see the guardedness in her expression, the way she held her shoulders slightly raised as if preparing for something unpleasant, and the manner in which she kept checking her father's face for reassurance. James approached the bench where Sarah was sitting. "Emma," he said gently, "I'd like you to meet Sarah. She's the person I told you about who might spend some time with us." Emma's response was immediate and predictable. She stepped behind her father and peered around his leg at Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Sarah had expected this reaction and had prepared accordingly. Instead of immediately trying to engage Emma in conversation or bending down to her eye level, which many adults did automatically, but which could feel intimidating to a child who was already feeling defensive, Sarah remained seated and addressed James while making it clear that Emma was welcome to observe and participate at her own pace. "Thank you for meeting me here," Sarah said to James. "This is such a beautiful park. I noticed there's a really interesting climbing structure over there, and I saw some kids earlier who were having what looked like epic adventures on it." Emma's eyes flicked toward the climbing structure Sarah had mentioned. It was a calculated observation. Sarah had chosen to mention something that might interest Emma without making it a direct invitation or expectation. "Emma loves that climbing structure," James said, following Sarah's lead. "She's incredibly brave and athletic. She can get to the very top faster than kids much older than her." Sarah noticed the small spark of pride that crossed Emma's face at her father's words. "That's impressive," Sarah said genuinely. "I've always admired kids who are willing to challenge themselves physically. It takes real courage to push your limits and try things that might be scary." For the first time, Emma spoke, though she addressed her father rather than Sarah directly. "Daddy, can I show her the secret passage in the climbing thing?" "Of course you can," James replied. "Would you like Sarah to come with us, or would you prefer to show her from here first?" Emma considered this carefully. "She can come, but she has to promise not to tell other kids about the secret passage, because then it won't be special anymore." Sarah understood that this was Emma's first test establishing whether Sarah could be trusted with something important to her. "I absolutely promise," Sarah said solemnly. "Secret passages should definitely stay secret, and I'm honored that you're willing to share it with me." As they walked toward the playground equipment, Sarah was careful to maintain a relaxed pace and avoid overwhelming Emma with questions or commentary. Instead, she made casual observations about their surroundings that Emma could engage with or ignore as she chose. "I love how all the leaves are changing colors," Sarah mentioned as they passed under a maple tree. "It's like the whole world is turning into art." Emma looked up at the branches overhead. "My mom used to say that autumn was nature's way of showing off," she said quietly. It was the first time Emma had mentioned her mother, and Sarah recognized the significance of this moment. Rather than immediately responding with sympathy or trying to explore the topic further, she simply acknowledged Emma's words with respect. "Your mom sounds like she had a beautiful way of looking at the world," Sarah said gently. "That's a lovely way to think about autumn." Emma nodded and then ran ahead toward the climbing structure, calling back, "Come on, I'll show you the secret passage now." What followed was 15 minutes of pure adventure. Emma's secret passage was a cleverly designed tunnel system within the climbing structure that wasn't immediately obvious to casual observers. She had discovered that by following a specific route, you could move through the entire playground without touching the ground. Sarah was genuinely impressed by Emma's discovery and said so. But more importantly, she allowed herself to be guided by Emma's expertise rather than trying to take control or redirect the activity. When Emma explained the intricate rules she had developed for navigating the passage, Sarah listened attentively and asked thoughtful questions that showed she was taking Emma's creation seriously. "So if someone touches the ground in the middle section, they have to start over completely?" Sarah asked. "Exactly," Emma replied enthusiastically. "Unless it's an emergency. Emergency touches don't count, but you have to declare it an emergency before you touch, not after." Sarah nodded gravely. "That's a very fair rule. It prevents cheating but still allows for safety. You've thought this through very carefully." As Emma demonstrated her route through the secret passage, Sarah noticed several things that impressed her. First, Emma's physical coordination and problem-solving skills were indeed exceptional for a 7-year-old. Second, the elaborate rules and storylines Emma had created around the playground showed a sophisticated imagination and a need for control and predictability in her environment. Third, Emma's willingness to share this special creation suggested that despite her guardedness, she had a deep desire to connect with others. After Emma had successfully completed the secret passage route twice, she turned to Sarah with a challenging look. "Now you have to try it," she announced. This was clearly another test. Sarah looked at the climbing structure, mentally calculating the physical requirements. Some of the transitions would be challenging given her height, but they weren't impossible. More importantly, she recognized that Emma was offering her a chance to prove she was willing to enter Emma's world on Emma's terms. "I'll definitely try," Sarah said. "But I might need some coaching from the expert. Some of those transitions look pretty tricky." Emma's face lit up with pride at being called the expert. "Don't worry," she said confidently. "I'll help you. The hardest part is the monkey bars in the middle section, but there's a special technique." What followed was a delightful role reversal. Emma became the teacher, patiently explaining each section of the route and offering encouragement and advice as Sarah navigated the challenges. When Sarah struggled with one particular transition, Emma problem-solved alternative approaches, showing remarkable empathy and adaptability. "It's okay that you're having trouble with that part," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Your legs are shorter than most grown-ups, so you need a different strategy. Try using the side rail for extra support." Sarah was struck by Emma's natural, unself-conscious acceptance of physical differences and her immediate shift into problem-solving mode. There was no pity or awkwardness, just practical thinking about how to adapt the challenge to Sarah's capabilities. When Sarah finally completed the secret passage route, Emma clapped enthusiastically. "You did it. And you didn't even need any emergency touches." James had been watching from nearby, and Sarah could see the amazement in his expression. In 30 minutes, Emma had gone from hiding behind his leg to actively teaching and encouraging a virtual stranger. It was more engagement than she had shown with any previous caregiver. As they sat on a bench afterward, Emma chatted easily about other adventures she had discovered in the park, her favorite climbing routes, and the various imaginary games she played in different areas. She included Sarah naturally in the conversation, asking for her opinions and building on her suggestions. "Sarah," Emma said suddenly, "do you want to see my other favorite place in the park? It's not as exciting as the secret passage, but it's really peaceful." Emma led them to a quiet grove of trees where someone had placed several large, smooth stones in a natural circle. Emma explained that she liked to sit there when she needed to think or when she missed her mom. "Sometimes I pretend she's sitting on one of the other rocks," Emma confided. "Not in a sad way, just in a way that makes me feel like she's still part of my adventures." Sarah felt a profound respect for this 7-year-old's emotional wisdom. "That sounds like a beautiful way to keep your connection with her," she said. "She probably loves knowing that you still include her in the special places you discover." As their park visit concluded, Emma surprised everyone by asking directly, "When are you coming to our house?" James looked at Sarah with hope and gratitude in his eyes. The connection he had hoped for had happened, naturally and authentically, based on mutual respect and genuine interest rather than forced cheerfulness or artificial entertainment. "Well," Sarah said, looking at Emma, "that depends on whether you'd like me to visit, and when would work best for you." Emma considered this seriously. "Maybe next Saturday? And you have to promise to let me show you my room and my art supplies." "I promise," Sarah replied, and Emma beamed. 6 months later, the Wellington household had been completely transformed. What had once been a house filled with tension, failed relationships, and a deeply unhappy child had become a home filled with laughter, learning, and genuine joy. Sarah had not only exceeded every expectation James had held, but she had fundamentally changed how both father and daughter understood what family could look like. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Those first few weeks had required patience, creativity, and unwavering commitment from everyone involved. Emma had tested Sarah's boundaries repeatedly, not out of malice, but from a deep-seated need to confirm that this new person in her life wouldn't disappear when things got difficult. There was the morning Emma deliberately spilled paint all over her art table to see if Sarah would get angry and quit like one of the previous nannies had when faced with a mess. Instead, Sarah had calmly helped clean up while suggesting they create a collaborative painting using the spilled colors as a starting point. They ended up creating a masterpiece that still hung prominently in Emma's room. There was the afternoon Emma pretended to be sick to avoid going to a playdate, testing whether Sarah would force her to go or respect her feelings. Sarah had recognized the anxiety behind the behavior and spent the time helping Emma develop strategies for managing social situations that felt overwhelming. They practiced conversation starters, planned exit strategies for when Emma felt uncomfortable, and created a secret signal system so Emma could communicate with Sarah if she needed support during social activities. Most significantly, there was the evening 3 weeks into Sarah's employment when Emma had a complete emotional breakdown, triggered by a school assignment about family trees. All her grief, fear, and anger came pouring out in a torrent of tears and accusations. She screamed that she didn't want a new person in her life, that everyone always left, and that she wished everyone would just go away and leave her alone. Sarah's response to this crisis had proven to James that his instincts about her had been absolutely correct. Instead of taking Emma's words personally or trying to immediately calm her down, Sarah had simply sat with Emma through the storm of emotions, offering quiet presence and unconditional acceptance. She didn't try to fix Emma's feelings or convince her that everything would be okay. She just acknowledged that missing her mom was incredibly painful and that being afraid of losing people you care about made perfect sense. "Your feelings are completely valid," Sarah had told Emma during that difficult evening. "Losing your mom was the worst thing that could happen, and it makes sense that you'd be scared about caring about new people. I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen again, because that's not how life works. But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere by choice, and that no matter what happens, the care and connection we build together will always be real and valuable." That breakdown had marked a turning point. Emma's emotional walls had finally come down, and the real work of healing and growth could begin. Sarah had helped Emma develop a sophisticated understanding of her emotions, teaching her to identify different types of sadness, worry, and anger, and providing her with tools for managing each one effectively. Emma learned breathing techniques for anxiety, creative expression methods for processing grief, and communication strategies for when she felt overwhelmed. But more importantly, she learned that having difficult emotions didn't make her broken or different in a bad way. It made her human and capable of deep feeling and empathy. The academic transformation had been equally remarkable. Emma had always been intellectually gifted, but her emotional struggles had been interfering with her ability to focus and engage with learning. Sarah had developed an educational approach that honored Emma's intelligence while incorporating emotional learning and creative expression. Their daily lessons became adventures in discovery. When studying geography, they would cook foods from different countries and learn about the cultures that created them. When exploring science concepts, they would conduct experiments that Emma could then teach to her father when he came home from work. When practicing math, they would use real-world applications like planning imaginary trips or calculating the materials needed for Emma's increasingly elaborate art projects. Emma's confidence had blossomed in ways that amazed everyone who knew her. She had gone from a withdrawn child who avoided social situations to someone who actively sought out opportunities to connect with others. She had started a club at school for kids who had experienced loss, creating a safe space where children could share their experiences and support each other. The club had been Emma's idea, inspired by conversations with Sarah about how their own challenges could become sources of strength and wisdom that could help others. Emma had approached her school counselor with a detailed proposal, complete with meeting structure, activities, and goals. The counselor had been so impressed that she had implemented the program immediately. James watched in amazement as his daughter developed into a confident, empathetic leader who could help other children navigate difficulties while continuing to process her own grief in healthy ways. Emma's teacher reported that she had become one of the most emotionally intelligent students in the class, often serving as a mediator when conflicts arose between classmates. The relationship between James and Emma had also been transformed. Sarah had helped James understand how to support Emma's emotional needs while maintaining appropriate boundaries and expectations. She had coached him through difficult conversations, helped him recognize Emma's emotional cues, and taught him strategies for staying connected with his daughter even when his work demands were intense. James had learned to schedule regular one-on-one time with Emma, creating rituals and traditions that strengthened their bond. They had established a weekly adventure day, where Emma got to choose an activity they would do together. They had created a bedtime routine that included sharing the best and most challenging parts of their day. Most importantly, James had learned to talk openly with Emma about missing her mother, rather than avoiding the topic out of fear of causing pain. Sarah had also helped James understand that Emma's healing didn't require forgetting her mother or moving on from her grief. Instead, it meant learning to carry that love and loss in ways that enhanced rather than limited her life. Emma had created memory books, written letters to her mother, and developed rituals for including her mother's memory in special occasions. The impact of Sarah's work extended far beyond the Wellington household. Word had spread through their community about the remarkable transformation that had taken place, and other families had begun reaching out for advice and support. Sarah had started consulting with families facing similar challenges, and her blog had evolved into a resource for parents, educators, and caregivers working with children who had experienced trauma or felt different from their peers. The placement agency that had initially struggled to find Sarah work had contacted her repeatedly, asking if she would consider other positions with their high-profile clients. But Sarah was exactly where she belonged. James had offered her a salary that reflected her true value, benefits that supported her continued education and professional development, and most importantly, the opportunity to make a profound difference in the lives of people she had grown to love. Dr. Hayes, Emma's therapist, had been amazed by the progress Emma had made. During their final session together, she had told James and Sarah that Emma had developed emotional intelligence and coping skills that many adults never achieve. Emma has learned to view her differences and challenges as sources of strength rather than shame, Dr. Hayes had observed. She understands that everyone faces difficulties, and that overcoming them develops resilience, empathy, and wisdom that can be used to help others. That's a profound life lesson that will serve her well in everything she does. On a sunny afternoon exactly 6 months after that first meeting in the park, Sarah sat in the Wellingtons' garden watching Emma teach a group of neighborhood children how to navigate the elaborate obstacle course they had built together. Emma was patient with the younger kids, encouraging with those who struggled, and generous in sharing credit when others contributed ideas. James joined Sarah on the garden bench, both of them smiling as they watched Emma's natural leadership and kindness in action. "I still can't believe how much everything has changed," James said quietly. 6 months ago, I was terrified that Emma might never heal from losing her mother. Now she's helping other kids work through their own challenges." Sarah nodded, feeling the deep satisfaction that comes from work that truly matters. "She was always capable of this," Sarah replied. "She just needed someone to believe in her strength and help her find ways to express it." As they watched Emma organize the other children into teams for a collaborative building project, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. All the rejections, all the assumptions about her limitations, all the doors that had closed had ultimately led her to the family who needed exactly what she had to offer. Emma looked over at Sarah and James and waved enthusiastically. "Sarah, Daddy, come help us build the castle tower. We need engineers." As they joined the group of children, Sarah smiled at the beautiful irony of her situation. She had been told repeatedly that families wouldn't want someone like her caring for their children. Instead, she had found a family who understood that her unique perspective, hard-won wisdom, and authentic approach to overcoming challenges were exactly what their child needed to heal and thrive. Sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages, and sometimes the person who seems different is exactly the person who can make all the difference.